Hey there, courageous leader. Looking for a place to connect, share, and collaborate with other ambitious, impact driven powerhouses? Well, look no further. Join me and dozens of other bold, action oriented women in leadership in the Lead Hers Lounge. The Lead Hers Lounge is a no cost monthly meetup for listeners of the show and my broader She Leads community so that we can come together and uncover opportunities to collaborate with each other and magnify our impact. We meet monthly on the fourth Wednesday of every month. Details to save your spot for the next no-cost meetup is in the show notes below, or you can head over to SabineGideon.com/lounge to register. Again, that's SabineGideon.com/lounge to register and save your spot. I'll see you in the lounge. Thank you for joining me on another episode of She Leads Now podcast, where we help career and entrepreneurial women gain the tools to develop a success mindset, create winning strategies, build collaborative relationships, and take bold action towards creating impact and fulfillment in their lives and careers. I'm your host, Sabine Gideon, and I'm on a mission to awaken and activate women and emerging leaders so they can tap into their innate leadership ability, elevate their influence, and create the impact they were destined to make. If you're ready to uplevel your confidence, courage, and influence, you've come to the right place. Join me weekly for insights, strategies, and resources to help you grow, develop, and embody the leader you were meant to be, so that you can make the impact you know you are called to make and establish the legacy you've always dreamed. The world eagerly awaits the emergence of your brilliance, impact, and influence. So with that, let's dive into this week's episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the She Leads Now podcast. So excited to bring another solo episode to you this week. If you're completely new to me or completely new to the show, I am Sabine Gideon, and I serve women-led businesses, and I empower their leadership to show up courageously in their lives and their businesses. I am also the founder of She Leads Network, which is a professional development and training community for women and emerging leaders. So without further ado, let's get into today's show and today's topic. So for those of you who follow me on social media, primarily LinkedIn and Instagram, for 40 days or so previously, starting in January, I was doing a daily release of lessons that I had learned in life, leadership, and business. And so the series was titled 40 and 40. Lessons learned in life, leadership, and business. And as I thought about, now that my birthday has come and gone, I wanted to provide a quick synopsis of those lessons on the show itself, as I know that often with social media, with these algorithms, some things people see, some things people don't see. And I know that there was also a period where, as I was launching the podcast, I wanted to focus primarily on the podcast launch. So there was a week in between where I didn't do any of the postings, and I kind of just added them towards the end there. And so I realizing that, 40 lessons, my videos were about, 4 to 5 minutes each. If I were to try to do that now, it'd be like a 2-hour episode. So we're not going to do that. Instead, I've broken it into 20 and 20. So this will be part 1 of the 40 and 40 lessons learned in leadership, life, and business. So this is part 1. So we're going to go through the first 20. Of course, I'm going to give you the highlight reels of these particular lessons. But if you want to follow the hashtag Sabine Says on either LinkedIn or Instagram, you'll be able to go back through and actually listen to each one of them and or read the captions and get, the full gamut of what the lesson was. And so I wanted to provide a little bit more context as well as to, why I decided to do this series and what it really meant to me. Of course, I wanted to keep it, light, fun, and airy as like a countdown to a milestone birthday. But prior to making this move, and I've shared this obviously in my book, and I've shared this in my other podcasts as well, but I wanted to provide some background or some foundation on why celebrating or even focusing on this was important to me. And so for those of you who know my story, you know that, part of what really shifted my life or changed my life, I would say for the better, is I had gotten to a point when I was about 25 years old of deep, 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 deep depression, to the point of, being suicidal. And I'd gotten to a place where I had planned out my last day because, hey, I am a planner. I had planned out my last day, and I don't say that to make light of that space, just more so I was operating in my natural nature. And I got to a point at 25 where living didn't make sense for me, based on everything that I had lived through up until that point. It just felt to me that if this was life, then I didn't want to be here. I didn't want to have to endure the life that I had endured up until that point. And it was an experience that I had, an experience with God, to be specific, that really completely shifted my life. And so when I had gotten down to my quote unquote last day, or my planned last day, it was me crying out to God for a glimmer of hope or of reason to live. My prayer was basically I could continue to endure the pain. I could continue to endure all of the things that I had been through if I knew that there was a purpose, if I knew that there was a reason for my life. And up until that point, I had not seen that reason. And so I asked God for two things. One, to show me that he was real, because up until that point, I had, somewhat of a knowledge just based on my quote unquote religious background, but not a real true belief, understanding, or awareness of God. The second question that I asked was, show me what my purpose was. And in that moment, I had an experience with God where, in my lowest of lowest of lowest moments, he wrapped his arms around me and reassured me that one, he was real, and two, there was a purpose for my life. And so I woke up the next day and I decided to live at that point. And I decided to live with the intention of uncovering and living out my purpose. For the last several years, what I've been able to use as my guide, or my North Star, if you will, has been this reality that I have a purpose. My life means something, and the quest to fully live that out. So that's why, this birthday milestone was so important to me. It's because, there was a point in time where I didn't see myself even living to this place, let alone, really stepping into who I am, my identity, really stepping into the purpose that I was created to have or to live out on this earth. And really being at a place where I see life differently. I see life not as a series of hardships, and not as a series of abusive relationships, or a series of rejection, of hurt and pain, but as a journey, and as a journey of discovery, as a journey of finding out my true identity, and as a journey of serving others. So that's the backdrop of me, my background, and my story. And then kind of how I leverage that experience to really think back through what are some of the lessons that I've learned and am still learning, that have really shaped me and really allowed me to become the person that I am, and allowed me to help and serve others in the capacity that I've been able to, and certainly want to continue to do. So we're starting off with lesson one as plan for the worst case scenario. And so oftentimes when we're ready to step into something new, like, taking a leap out of corporate America to start our own business, or to expand and grow our businesses, or we're ready to break outside of our comfort zone in any capacity, whether it be professionally or personally, all of our fears, our doubts, our insecurities, our anxiety, everything comes out of hiding. And that inner critic also adds fuel to the fire. And it's so easy for us to start to listen to that inner critic, start to listen to those fears, doubts, and insecurities, and begin to talk ourselves out of doing whatever it is that's new, that's different, or that's unfamiliar. And so that's basically our mind's way of trying to protect us and keep us safe. And more than likely, we'll find ourselves starting to think of all of the negative things that could happen, all of the things that we don't have, we don't have this certification, we don't have this team member, and so on, and all of the reasons why it won't work. So planning for the worst case scenario as lesson number one is really, understanding that our mind is going to take us down a negative rabbit hole because it wants to protect us and it wants to move us away from doing whatever is new, whatever is risky, whatever is challenging. So, listen to those, but then use what you know to be true, or use the resources that you have to really start to make a plan for it so that you can help put your mind at ease first and foremost, and then two, begin to build a plan and a strategy so that, if by making this leap, whatever it is that you're fearing occurs, you now have a backup plan, or you now have something that you can use to mitigate whatever that's going to be. Lesson number two was titled Daring to Dream. So at some point in our lives, right, we may find ourselves feeling a little stuck, a little pigeonholed, or like we've hit the ceiling in our careers, or even in our businesses. And I'm sure we've all experienced that in some capacity, where we hit this point of, okay, what I'm doing is fine and I can continue to do it, but something inside of me is telling me that there's more and that I should step out. But what happens? That's when the first lesson comes into play, right? Our mind begins to tell us these are the things that, we can't do or we shouldn't do. And these are the reasons why it won't work. And so I also work with a lot of women who are in this space of transition, meaning that they may have not yet fully decided what next looks like, but they know that there has to be a next, whether that's an expansion in their business, expansion on their teams, a personal expansion for themselves. It can get overwhelming trying to figure out, what is this next major life or business move. And so the step back that I've challenged clients to make is really, if you're in that place, specifically if you're in this place where what you're doing today is not what you want to continue to do, but you don't yet have the clarity on what your next may look like. This is an opportunity for you to really take some time and make a list. I usually say about 25, maybe even 50, but we'll start with 25. 25 things that you would do if money were no object, there were no restrictions on your time or your location, and you weren't going into it with the mindset of worrying about bills, responsibilities, your business, and so on. And I really invite you to be a kid again and let your imagination run wild of these 25 things that you would do. And I would encourage you, don't stop until you get to 25. 25 is the minimum, but you can certainly do more. And then start to look for patterns. What are some of the things that have come up for you that are similar in nature? And identify, one or two that you could begin to explore. Doesn't mean that you have to take the full leap. It just means that you're willing to begin to explore these things because they've come up in some variation in your list, more than 2 or 3 times. So that's number two, Dare to Dream. Again, you can go into full detail of these following the hashtag Sabine Says on LinkedIn or on Instagram. The third lesson is not being afraid to start again. I think for many of us, we think that we need permission somehow from others, or even permission from ourselves sometimes, to pivot and to shift whatever it is that we're doing. And in reality, we don't need permission, right? It's just a decision that we need to make. In this particular lesson, I shared how, over the 10-year period, I had started and stopped my business several times for various different reasons. And each time I went to go start again, the inner critic was there like, oh, are you doing this again? Last time it was this. What are people going to say? And what are people going to think? And I'm so glad that at least for that particular criticism, I didn't listen to my inner critic. And in trying different things, in stepping out of my comfort zone, the many times I was able to, one, learn new skills, learn new things, grow personally as an individual and certainly as a professional, and expand my network, because each one required me to tap into a different network and a different resource. And so, if you're at the place where you probably have, gained some success in whatever it is that you're doing, or maybe you haven't gained success yet and you're thinking about making a pivot to something that, might be more enjoyable, I would invite you to challenge your inner critic and to just go ahead and go for it and to start again. I think this journey, as I always call it, this journey of life is about discovery. And the more we try to put limitations on who we are, what we're capable of, and what life should look like for us, the more we limit ourselves and the more we keep ourselves imprisoned, both in our own minds and what it is that we're capable of doing. So, if you have something that is piercing at you to try, or something that, within you feel, I want to test this out. At the very least, I want to test this out. I would challenge you or invite you to do just that, to test it out, to start all over again, to dip your toes in the water and see what comes about. Lesson number 4, piggybacking off of that, is progress over perfection. I know the struggle, trust me. Stepping out of your comfort zone, starting again, pushing past your fears, pushing past your insecurities means that you are often starting as a beginner and that you don't have all the answers and you don't have a clear-cut roadmap. And for those of us who have perfectionist tendencies, who want to get it right the first time, or who want to make sure that we know that if we take, step 1 and 2, that it's going to equal 3, making these leaps can feel almost debilitating, because you don't want to make the wrong move. So one thing that I would say when it comes to overcoming perfection, or maybe not even overcoming perfection, but just making progress in spite of your perfectionism, is to just take action, take imperfect action, because only through taking action will you actually be able to position yourself to learn something new, be in the space where you can receive new information, where you can receive new resources, things that you couldn't see before, you'll be able to see them. And so my invitation to you in this particular lesson is just focus on moving forward. None of us will ever be perfect. Ease the burden in your own mind around things having to be perfect and see it as an opportunity to explore, an opportunity to grow, an opportunity to uncover things about yourself and things about others that perhaps you couldn't see behind, the glasses of perfectionism. Lesson number 5, the 5 whys. I was actually just interviewing someone, and she mentioned this as a part of her strategy. So I was happy to hear that others use these 5 whys as well. And so 5 whys is pretty much a process that I would encourage everyone to add to their toolbox for the next time you encounter an issue or a challenge that you just can't seem to break through. And so 5 whys comes out of the manufacturing world, and basically it is a way to get to the root of a problem. Once I discovered 5 whys, I started using it to help me through personal challenges and everyday occurrences. And so basically what you do with the 5 whys, if you're not familiar with it, is you take whatever situation, whatever surface level issue or challenge you are facing, and you ask yourself why 5 times. So if it could be something as easy as, I was late to a meeting today. Well, why? Because I didn't wake up on time. Why? Because I hit the snooze 5 times. You go down the path of getting to the root of it and identify a solution or to help you move in a direction or a path that makes more sense or that is aligned with where you want to go. So that is the 5 whys. You can certainly research it. But I would just say it's really as simple as if you find yourself in a place where you are stuck or you don't have clarity, or, maybe you're just trying to get to the root cause of something, just ask yourself why 5 times. And sometimes it takes more than 5, and sometimes you'll get to the answer in much less time. But that's the basis of that tool and that lesson. Lesson number 6 is ask or the answer will always be no. And so this is definitely for my ladies, obviously, if you're listening to this podcast. But this has been a lesson that it's a lesson in progress, if I'm being honest, learning to ask for the things that I need. And this goes along with, what I teach around negotiations, not just salary negotiations, but negotiating for the things that we want, negotiating for boundaries in our lives. But often we don't ask for what we need because we fear hearing the word no, we fear rejection, we fear being judged, or we may also have this belief that, having to ask for something is a sign of weakness. And the truth is, none of that is true. The reality is when we don't ask for the things that we want, obviously we don't get them. And then we may end up in a situation where we end up feeling slighted, we become resentful, or even angry towards people for not being able to quote unquote read our minds and or supporting us in the way that we would want. If you're in a place where you struggle with asking for what you need, just know at the end of the day, the worst thing that anyone can say to you is no. And even when people say no the first time or even the second time, it just means that, it's not the right time. It's really important to shift your mindset about what it means to hear the word no. Look at it this way. You can either have your needs and your wants communicated and heard, or you could cower to fear because you're afraid of hearing the word no. And we know at the end of the day, no one's a mind reader. So if we don't ask for the things that we need, we're really doing a disservice to ourselves, and we're doing a disservice for those around us or those who we're in relationship with that we have not yet asked for the things that we need. Lesson number 7 is keep a brag book. Some have different terminology for what they call this, but basically the purpose of maintaining a brag book is to serve as a reminder to you of all the things that you've achieved. It's to provide encouragement when you're feeling down and defeated, because there are definitely those days. It's to help silence the voice of your inner critic when you're embarking on something new. As we know, whenever we're about to step onto something new, all of the reminders of, why it won't work or experience that we don't have, it will come up. So your brag book can serve as a way to remind yourself of the things that you actually have, started that were new and that you were successful with. And then it'll help you move past any fear of uncertainty around, your ability to do great things. I would encourage you to update it often. It's a great way to, one, help you throughout the year, throughout whenever, so that you can look back on it to recall the great things that you've achieved much quicker and much faster. Lesson number 8 here is busy does not equal productivity. As women, as leaders, I know that it's so easy for us to get sucked into all of the things. And so after these last couple of years and after, experiencing burnout a couple times, which I know many of my listeners have experienced as well, I've gotten real protective of my time, real protective of my energy, because we know, like, we're of no good to ourselves or anyone else when we're in that space of feeling depleted in any capacity. So when it comes to being productive or looking at productivity, I've shifted how I do things. Now, I still keep a task list of the things that I need to do just so I have a visual. However, I have transitioned to really focusing on 3 main priorities each day. And you can do this on a daily basis. You can do this on a weekly basis, monthly basis, whatever works for you. But identifying 3 core things that are important to you or to your business that you want to prioritize every day. And so for me, as a business owner, it's revenue generation, content creation, and networking, or nurturing and building my relationships. And so for you, depending on where you are in your business or in your life, it might look a little different. But now that I've identified these 3, I can then identify, okay, well, what are the tasks that are going to help me move forward in these 3 particular priorities? It helps create some structure for me as someone who's working from home 100%, someone who's an entrepreneur, because that shiny object syndrome is real. And so it allows me to stay focused on, what's most important, what's going to move my business forward, and what is going to support my clients the most. And so identify what those 3 priorities are for you, and then maybe 1 to 2 tasks that you can complete that will help support those particular priorities. Then that way, at the end of the day, you're not looking at this task list of 15 things that you weren't able to cross off, which leaves you feeling bad about yourself. But you can look at, okay, these are my 3 priorities, and I completed at least 1 task under each. So it gives you that feeling of accomplishment as well. Lesson number 9 is growth is painful. When we think about growth, often we think about the beauty or the beautiful side of it, right? We think about when, flowers are in full bloom. We think about when, our bank account grows, or we think about when our businesses are growing. We think about when our teams are growing. And, that's a really, really great feeling. And that's a really great space to be in, right? But the process to get there often does not feel good. And sometimes the process to get to growth may look completely opposite of where we're headed. The lesson that I learned in this really allowed me to debunk that notion or that myth that growth feels pleasant, or that growth even looks like growth when it's happening, and has allowed me to surrender to growth in a way that it's those moments where things feel out of control. They call it growing pains for a reason, right? It's those moments where there may be frustration, there may be feelings of not being able to see, or not being able to see clearly, that is in fact growth. And so I've shifted my mindset when I'm in those particular seasons of growth, not to allow myself to get wrapped too much into what's happening externally, but to stay anchored and focused on where I'm headed. Because when that turmoil and that tornado of stuff is happening around us, it's so easy to get caught up in that. It's so easy to get lost in that. But anchoring in the understanding that, okay, I'm growing. So this part feels uncomfortable. It feels unclear. It just feels like I'm completely out of control, but I know where I'm headed. I know that it's part of my process. And hopefully that gives you the courage, and that gives you the extra added strength to continue to move forward. Next up is lesson number 10, and that's leadership as an identity. So clearly these are not in any particular order, but you've heard me share this on the podcast many a times, and you'll continue to hear me share it, is that, leadership is not about a role. It's not about your level in an organization. It's not about your position of power in any case, but it is in fact an identity. It is part of who we are as human beings, and we all have the capacity. While we may not all be called to, being leaders in the White House or leaders in an organization or whatever, we are all leaders. We all have that innate ability. And when you look around every part of the world, it's sad and it's unfortunate to have to say, but we can see the effects of the absence of true leadership. She Leads is an entire movement that I feel in this season of my life called to lead and to bring awareness to, because I do believe that because of the absence of leadership that we are now seeing, that is clearly visible in every corner, every area, and every aspect of our lives. There is no hiding at this point. There is a crying out in our nation and in our world for individuals, and I do believe women in particular, to really stand up and begin to demonstrate what leadership is from a place that is authentic and a place that is moral and a place that is righteous. So leadership is an identity. You'll hear me talk about that a million times over. So that was lesson number 10. Okay, so that sums up lessons 1 through 10 from the series, the Top 40 and 40 Lessons Learned in Leadership, Life, and Business. And speaking of leadership being an identity, today's episode is sponsored by She Leads Network, the professional development and training community for ambitious, impact-driven women. Members include leaders at various levels within their organizations, from startup founders to leaders in transition and executives. The network was created to support the ever-growing need for real, genuine, and authentic leadership in our society. Many of us have had to carry the weight of the lack of leadership on our shoulders, from the pandemic and having to care for our children and become teachers, to caring for sick loved ones, to tending to the mental and emotional needs of our teams, to managing the financial crisis, and the list goes on. And despite the weight, we've proven time and time again, and without a shadow of a doubt, that not only are we strong, but we are more than capable of leading effectively in the face of adversity and during times of uncertainty. It's in our DNA. And for many, this is a time of awakening to the truth of our innate ability to lead, influence others, and impact change in the world around us. I personally invite you to become a member of She Leads Network, where you'll gain access to personalized training and development to build your confidence as a leader, to draw from your well of courage, and to deepen your level of influence while expanding your impact within your designated sphere of influence. Full details for membership are available at sheleadsnetwork.com. Again, that's sheleadsnetwork, all one word.com. You'll find the link in the show notes. Also, as a bonus, listeners of the show are eligible for a 10% discount off membership. That's both the quarterly membership as well as the annual. So when you head over to sheleadsnetwork.com, you can choose the membership term that works best for you. And in the coupon code area, you'll enter in SLN podcast, all one word, and get 10% off. All of this information will be located in the show notes as well, so be sure to check that out. And with that, we'll head back over to the remaining 10 lessons learned. All right, so lesson number 11 of the Top 40 and 40 is focused on imposter syndrome. And now we know, we all know, I'm sure I have yet to meet one person and one woman in particular who is leading in any capacity who has not faced or experienced imposter syndrome. So while we have all faced it, we have all experienced it, I do think that there comes a point where we have to delineate the feeling of imposter syndrome from our actual identity, right? So we know imposter syndrome as that nagging belief that we're not good enough, or that we're not capable or not ready of succeeding in whatever it is that we're moving towards. It's also the self-defeating belief that tries to keep us from trying new things and stepping outside of our comfort zone. So very much like our inner critic, it's also that critical voice that we internalize and unfortunately give permission to hold us back from going after the things that we want most. And so, when it comes to imposter syndrome, I do believe that it's something that might always stay with us. I mean, I feel like the inner critic will always be with me, but I've identified what that voice looks, sounds like, and what critical things it says, and have built in or acquired these tools to help me, either silence or refute or shut down before it gets to the place where it can stop me from moving forward. And so Just a couple things that I want to share with you in terms of being able to recognize and dethrone, if you will, that imposter syndrome. Pay attention to the thoughts and take note when you find yourself making excuses for why you can't do something or don't want to pursue an opportunity. Let's just say something becomes available to you, or you've been thinking about making a leap, and then you find yourself, I don't have this certification, or I don't have this team member, or I don't have this, I don't have that. Those are sometimes the triggers to let you know that your imposter syndrome is showing up or is trying to take control. Assess if there is a legitimate reason you're holding back. If you've identified that you're making excuses for not moving forward with something, you have to ask yourself the questions like, well, why? Why am I not ready? Why am I not capable? Or better yet, why don't I feel ready? Or why don't I feel capable? And you can use the 5 whys tool that I talked about in one of the previous lessons. And then look for patterns where you are telling yourself, like if you do the 5 whys and you get to the place where, that one of the responses, I'm not good enough, or I feel like an imposter, then that is your indicator that this is not a you thing, but that this is in fact, your inner critic or your inner saboteur speaking. And you get to then decide, do I want to listen to this and do I want to believe this? Or do I want to move forward? And, sometimes just pushing through isn't the answer. While we would all want to just believe like, oh, I'm going to move forward anyway. That's not what typically happens. We go through this series of emotions. But one of the things that you can do, I should say a couple of the things that you can do, is to reframe those negative messages, right? Remind yourself of the great and courageous action that you've taken in the past. This is where you pull out that brag book or whatever you call it, that you look back at the things that you have done for the very first time that you didn't have experience in, or the, successes that you've had in the past. What are your strengths? What is your superpower? What are the things that without a shadow of a doubt that you are capable of doing and that you're capable of doing well? Recall the times in which you've, succeeded, again, leveraging that brag book if you have it. If not, this is a perfect time to start creating it. And then give yourself some grace. We're going to be beginners at something. So give yourself some grace that even if you don't get it right, the first time or the second time or the third time, you can continue to keep trying or keep working towards whatever it is that you're trying to test out that's new. So that is lesson number 11. Imposter syndrome does not have to become an identity. Number 12 is no is a complete sentence. And so this is being able to set boundaries, being able to communicate those boundaries. And so oftentimes, saying no, we as women in particular, not that I'm picking on us, but it is a reality. We feel that somehow saying no is being mean. And in fact, it's not being mean. It's being respectful both to us and to the person or to the ask. And so at the end of the day, we have to look at our time and our resources, or time as a resource, as being extremely finite. And so, when we're saying yes to things or anything that we're saying yes to, we have to remember that we're saying no to something else, whether we're saying it or not. So with that, especially in this time and space that we're in right now, where, we are being pulled in multiple different directions, and it's just so easy to get to the place of burnout. I would, encourage you to really start to assess the things that you say yes to. I was that person where if someone asked for something, like my mindset was, I'll figure it out. Now I'm at the place of, let me get back to you so that I can give myself the time and the space that I need to really assess if I can give my 100% to whatever this initiative is. And if the answer is no, I can't give 100%, then my answer to that particular request is going to be no. Because again, I value, my time, I value other people's time. And I don't want to put either one of us in a situation where I'm not showing up 100%. Just know sometimes there will be some guilt associated with saying no. That's completely normal. But some of the things that you can do to remind yourself, if you struggle with feeling guilty for saying no, just know that saying no will help in the habit of overcommitting. It will help you reduce or eliminate any undue stress, because when we're burnt out, we're stressed out. Like that's not a good feeling. Saying no will give you time back so you can spend it doing the things that fuel you versus the things that drain you. And then saying no at the end of the day will help you remain true to yourself. So you're not in this place where you feel pulled or you feel in conflict with what it is that you want to do versus what it is that you need to do. So that is that lesson. Next up, we have comparison is a dream killer. Now, we know this. Like there's so many opportunities all the time, especially with social media, to fall into that comparison trap. At the end of the day, we're all unique and we're talented in our own way. And we, of course, have all probably experienced comparison in one fashion or the other. And along with that, we've probably triggered our insecurities, and have allowed ourselves to go down this negative spiral. So if and when you should find yourself trapped in a state of comparison, I invite you to try out, one of the following. Either refocus your attention on your strengths, express gratitude for the things that you have and you can do well, and protect your peace, whether that means unfollowing, unsubscribing, distancing yourself for a while. Because at the end of the day, again, we all have our unique gifts and talents, your unique brilliance, your zone of genius, whatever you want to call it, or all of the above. And so when we get into that place of looking at what someone else is doing or what someone else has done, and it moves away from admiration to comparison, that's not a healthy space to be. And we all know that, but I get it. It doesn't stop us from doing that. Those are those moments where you need to go back and you take inventory of what it is that you've done, what it is that you've accomplished, and how that has had an impact so that it shifts the focus away from others or external factors and back to you and the impact that you have made. Number 14, teach others how to treat you, or how you want to be treated. And I think that this has been a very important lesson for me and for many others. Oftentimes, especially when we feel like individuals have violated our boundaries, or that, we're not being heard, or that we don't have the resources that we need. Oftentimes it's not because it's malicious or people are being intentional in their mistreatment of us. It's because we have yet to either identify what our boundaries are, we have yet to communicate what those boundaries are, and then most importantly, we may be struggling to reinforce those particular boundaries. So when it comes to, teaching people how you want to be treated, it's so important. And this is a lesson, quite frankly, I'm still learning. And reason being is because there is that part of me that always wants to serve, always wants to be there to add value to other people's lives. But in doing that, sometimes what that has equated to is, unfortunately, people taking advantage. Because if the message that is always being sent is, I'm available, or, I'll do whatever it is that you need, people will come to expect that of you continuously. A couple things that I would advise, get comfortable with respectfully communicating your boundaries. There is a way to say, hey, I'm not available, or I'd love to support you, but I don't have the capacity. Remain consistent in addressing any situations that cross the line, because I think that that's where people get caught up the most. Like that one time that it annoys you and you say something, but then the next 5 times you don't, that's confusing to people. And that becomes something that reinforces, oh, it's okay to do this. And then lastly, release anyone or anything that refuses to honor your request. And I know this sometimes can be really, really hard, because often the people who are crossing these boundaries are people that we love and that we care about. And part of the reason why they're crossing these boundaries, again, it's not because they're being malicious or trying to intentionally harm us. It's just, this is what they've always done. And so I would invite you to really get to a place where you are consistently identifying what is a boundary crosser, if you will, communicating when those things happen, and then reinforcing it from a place of love and compassion. I think most people will respect your boundaries if they one, know that they exist, and two, can understand how not respecting that boundary is harming you or is creating some negative impact. Number 15, we're almost there. It's really okay to admit that you're tired. I've talked about burnout a couple times here, and I feel like this was a lesson that was really pounded into me in these last 2 years of this pandemic. And so prior, my understanding or my awareness or my belief was all about working hard, right? Like, you couldn't succeed unless you worked super, super hard. And having been programmed like that as a child, and I know many of you are similar to me in that capacity, we've probably experienced burnout many, many, many times. But the mindset of, keep pushing, keep moving forward, don't stop, you're almost there, like whatever messages that we use. I don't know about you, but at some point, those messages no longer worked anymore. And my body, my mind, my spirit, all of it started feeling the weight of that. And so getting to the place within the last year that I've been able to admit to myself and to others when I am tired, like, that has been a huge leap for me, because before that, I wasn't tired. I just had to figure it out. I just had to push through. So if you are like I was, and still am a little bit, this is one of those lessons that you have to give yourself permission to admit that you're tired. And I invite you to get to the place where you're comfortable with sharing with others that you're tired, because again, it goes back to the previous lesson of, you teach people how to treat you. If you're always saying yes, and you're always doing things, and you're always figuring out, people are just going to keep, pouring, because that's what you allow. But if you can communicate to yourself and certainly others that, hey, I'm tired and I can't take on anymore, you'll find that people are much more willing or understanding of that, and will give you the space to recover and rejuvenate. Number 16, practice negotiating. This goes back to the, if you don't ask, then the answer will always be no. If you are that person who is afraid to ask, or you feel guilty for asking, or you have all of these voices around what it means to ask and the perception of you, this is for you, that you should continuously negotiate. And that could be in negotiating with your family members for, time away, like your self-care Sundays. It could be negotiating with your employees. It could be negotiating with your employer. It could be negotiating with your credit card providers or any service providers that you have. The list goes on. What I really want to encourage here is that, one, this will help you get past the fear of hearing no. It'll also position you to feel confident and courageous when it comes to negotiating those bigger things. If you can ask for or negotiate for, what I'm calling small things, like everyday things, then you'll begin to build up that muscle, so that when the big things happen, like you have to negotiate for a new car, or on a mortgage, or, whatever that big thing is, that you've already built those muscles. You already have that memory set in your mind of how to negotiate, how to ask for what you want, how to clearly articulate your value proposition. So practice negotiating as much as possible. I've heard people leverage this with kids, because kids are always challenging you in your stance or whatever you dictate. So if you have kids, practice with your kids. Then we move on to lessons 17, 18, 19, and 20. And so they were kind of combined in terms of things that steal our joy, but yet we have 100% control over it. And so the 17 was comparison, which I talked about a bit in a previous lesson. Procrastination. While oftentimes the reason why we're procrastinating is out of fear, or because our imposter syndrome or our negative critic is trying to talk us out of it. I think one of the things for me that has helped with procrastination is that I've started to identify what are my triggers? What makes me procrastinate? Oftentimes I can find the root of my procrastination is fear, especially if it comes to, doing something that I've never done before, or if I'm feeling overwhelmed. That's another trigger for me to start procrastinating. So, first identify what are your procrastination triggers? Like, when are you most likely to procrastinate? And then two, when you find yourself procrastinating, use the 5 whys exercise. What's at the root of that? Once you've identified why or the root for your procrastination, start to take small actions that can help you move away or move towards actually completing what you want versus getting stuck in the fear. Perfectionism, and we talked about that a little bit in one of the prior lessons, that it's a joy stealer. If your focus is really about perfection, you can easily get caught in the trap of analysis paralysis, and the things that you want to accomplish, the things that you want to do, they'll be left by the wayside, and then you end up feeling bad or feeling horrible about yourself because you weren't able to move forward in the way that you wanted to. And then the last one is people pleasing. Definitely could talk about people pleasing for hours, but for the sake of time, I won't. Many of us, especially those who, have this heart to serve, those of us who struggle with setting boundaries, those of us who struggle with hearing no or facing the rejection of hearing no, sometimes we go the other way and we start to people please so as not to hear no, not to experience the rejection, not to have to, deal with whatever negative fallout that comes with setting boundaries. And at the end of the day, people pleasing, while in the moment it may seem like the right thing to do, we all know the consequence, right? The consequence is burnout. The consequence is resentment. The consequence is feeling unheard, unseen, unvalued. And so if that's one of the areas that you struggle in, rather than leaning in on that behavior, really challenging yourself and stepping outside of your comfort zone and having those courageous conversations, whether it be with your employees, whether it be with your spouse, your family members, those within your organization, initiating those conversations and allowing yourself to be heard. So that is 1 through 20. I know that was quite a lot. Again, if you want to review the full lessons as they were released, you can follow the hashtag Sabine Says on either LinkedIn and Instagram. The videos are there, the captions are there. In each one, I gave a little bit more examples of how I learned those lessons or particular situations in my life that brought those lessons about. Hopefully this was helpful and that you've taken some lessons away from what I've shared. We will be back next week with another episode of the She Leads Now podcast. And again, registration is open for She Leads Network. As a listener of the show, you are eligible for a 10% discount. That link will be in the show notes. But in case you want to go check it out, you can go to She Leads Network and you can put in SLN podcast in the promo code area and get 10% off and start off your membership. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. I will be back next week with another interview with another powerhouse leader who will share her journey and her story of leadership and some of the lessons that she's learned. With that, have a great rest of the day, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of She Leads Now. Be sure to join us next week for another transformative discussion to help you grow, develop, and embody the courageous leader you've always been. Be sure to subscribe to the show to get alerts when new episodes drop, and join us for our next Leaders Lounge meetup on Zoom. Details and dates for future sessions are included in the show notes below, so take a look there or head over to SabineGideon.com/lounge to register and hold your spot for the next session. Again, that's SabineGideon.com/lounge to grab your spot. Excited to connect with you all inside the lounge. Talk to you soon.